Okay, welcome to this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast, where I'm talking to Tim Walmsley today. Now, Tim is someone that I've been watching and following for many years, particularly his journey into the great business BenchOn, which is a really good study in how to get down to those basics of solving a problem in business. So Tim, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Pete.
Mate, it's a real pleasure. As I mentioned, we've talked probably 10 times over the last few years as we've been learning a little bit about each other, particularly, I've been sharing the journey about the things we've been doing in the Veteran Community Business Chamber, but I'm really interested to unpack your journey today, particularly, why did you get into the military in the first place? Where did that spark or seed come from? And then take us through to that journey of BenchOn and let's unpack, why and how BenchOn actually is. So can I just get you to introduce yourself? Where did you come from? Which part of Australia did you grow up? And why did you end up in green?
Yeah, sure. So Tim Walmsley, CEO of BenchOn. I grew up in Brisbane to a middle-class family. Went to private school, had all of the benefits of a middle-class lifestyle. But when I sort of got to my late teens, I tended to go down the wrong path, and I was, working in nightclubs and partying all the time, and didn't really have any direction. Even though, I was smart at school, I got good grades. I just seemed to lose my way in my late teens. And actually, my girlfriend at the time, Katie, who's now my wife, she decided that she didn't want this schmozzle of a life, and so she was like, I'm going to join the military. And I was like, all right, good on you, great. I mean, I'll support you through your journey. And my intent was to run like a hotel or a nightclub, and party for the rest of my life. That was what I was going to do. So Katie went through the process, and as I looked at all the brochures and everything, I thought it looked really cool. Like, I thought, this looked great. And actually, I joke about this now because the brochure that got me into the military was the AGI brochure.
That's the Air Force, so the Air Defense Guards?
Yeah, the Air Force, ground protection for the runways, the air bases, and that sort of thing.
I know someone's going to cringe when I say this, but a somewhat infantry version for the Air Force.
Yeah, but I have a good mate who's an AGI, or who was an AGI. He now runs RSL Queensland, actually. But we give them a lot of stick in the military, because, or in the army side, because the AGIs all sort of go, we're basically the special forces of Air Force. And the infantry in the army would be like, no, you're a guard, walking the fence of an airfield. So there's this rivalry, and we make fun of each other. But actually, the AGI capability statement was the reason that it got me into actually applying. And it wasn't until I got into RMC that I decided that I wanted to do something different. But
and just to give a bit of AGI love out there, they actually do the army version of Royal Military College, I'm pretty sure. And in all honesty, they're probably way more worry than I ever was as a logistic officer. So
yeah, they do the RMC with us, but they're Air Force, and then they just sort of disappear into the Air Force at the end of RMC, and we never hear from them again. But which is why we love to give them a stick. But anyway, so Katie was applying, and I went, you know what, this looks pretty cool. I'll apply with you just to be a supportive boyfriend. And I got into RMC and she didn't, and which was ironic, because she really, really wanted to get in and I didn't. And so I went to RMC, and the RMC really broke me down as a human and built me back up to where I should have been, and did all of the things that you would expect good military training to do. And then at about the 1 year mark, that's when I married Katie, and I brought her down to Canberra, and we started our life there. And then I went into artillery. So I did Everything in artillery except artillery. So I never did the guns, but I did target acquisition radars. I did surveillance radars, intelligence. I was part of the group that introduced the unmanned aerial vehicles into Australia. And then I was lucky enough to then deploy with UAVs into Afghanistan. So yeah.
It's a funny thing, artillery, is when I went through college, artillery was almost, I'm going to be very careful what I say, because we all love our own cause. But artillery wasn't one of the highly selected corps, because there was an assumption they weren't going to deploy or anything like that. But if you actually went into artillery, you probably got more opportunities to deploy, and the kind of gigs that they did, not necessarily with guns, although I know one of our friends, Rob Hartley, got to deploy to Afghanistan with some English guns and actually did proper gunnery overseas. But the range of career paths through modern artillery is not just about throwing shells kilometers downrange.
No, so you've got air defense, which is where I started. I was in 16 Air Defense Regiment. You've now got counter rocket artillery and mortar, which is also 16 ALR now, so Air Land Regiment. You've got target acquisition, which is the monitoring of incoming rocket fire, and then the analysis of where those rockets or artillery are coming from, so that you can then affect that enemy that way. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So, ground-based radars, so that you can detect movement across the battle space. You can detect ship movement through, the north of Australia. So Op Resolute is run by ISR teams from 20th Surveillance and Target Acquisition Regiment. There's all these sort of cutting-edge technologies that are involved in artillery, and it's not just pulling the guns, and firing the guns. It's there's so much more to it, and it's a very complex environment. So I was actually really lucky to go through it and to be at that cutting edge of technology, and to always be looking to implement new things and evolve as we went through, which I think set me up well for when I got out of the military, to always be looking, well, let's look at things logically and how we can best implement this for the best effect, and then take new technology and new ideas and then implement them on top of that and continue to evolve. And I think that was one of the keys to my success.
It's an interesting mix from a capability perspective, that one of the most oldest styles of, warfare, or the profession of arms, which is gunnery, is infused with some of the most, latest up-to-date technology to make, to have such a definitive impact on the battle space.
Yeah, UAVs actually, and drones, for what most people know them as, was a humongous shift in military technology, and we faced things that we never thought we would face, like the culture of how those systems were implemented. And in the first few years when we implemented them, we ran into problems where commanders used these systems to monitor their own forces. Like we called it command porn. They just became fixated on the TV, and they just wanted to watch their own forces to go, well, are they at the right position? And they were, calling platoon, a CO was calling a platoon to go, you need to move up 20 meters to be in line with they weren't watching the enemy. They weren't watching it for battle space awareness. They were almost fixated on themselves. And that was a really big learning point for us to say, well, you've got this amazing technology that can do all of these things, and we had to redirect them and retrain them to use it properly and to the best effect.
It's interesting too, because on that note is one of the tenets of the way that the Australian military does warfare, being maneuver theory, is all about supposed to be giving initiative and responsibility in those command decisions down to the lowest possible level. And all of a sudden, as a platoon commander, you've got your boss literally watching you from above, micromanaging you. And I never considered it from looking at the blue force like that. So we made the shift then to tracking the red force, and it's all about intelligence feeds. Is that right?
Yeah, we learned that very quickly, and we focus specifically onto that to go, okay, we need to push out past our forces. We need to give our forces early warning. We need to be able to identify what the enemy's doing before our forces see them, and to be able to give them that intelligence so that they can make moves ahead of time and put themselves in the best position. And that's how, you know, the drone system linked into special forces. It's how it linked into our electronic warfare systems. And we used it as another system to provide another proof of, you know, wrongdoing from the enemy perspective. You know, we've correlated drone footage with this vehicle movement and this intelligence report, and then this phone report or phone call. And now we've confirmed that that is the target, and now we can affect that target.
This really wasn't that long ago too. I think we only started getting the, what is it? What is it? Oh, sorry, I've forgotten the unit's name. 16.
So 20 STA, so 20
STA.
surveillance and target acquisition is the unit that's the center of excellence. They were the first ones to implement drones in Australia, and they did that in 2005, 2006. And so that's when they implemented the first one. So the first drones were the Iraqi Skylark, and then the Boeing the Boeing Scan Eagle, which was you know, and those were the two drones we have. And now obviously we've got more. We've got the miniature drones. We've got the big, you know, the big ones. It looks like we're going to buy Global Hawk, and drones have now become part of all of the services. So it's evolved a lot.
In just that under 20 years time, it's gone from being, you know, a cutting edge capability to really just status quo now. And the other great thing about 20 STA, this surveillance and target acquisition. 16 was the Air Land Regiment from memory.
Yes, that's right.
These were the first opportunities, I believe, in the Australian Army. We had women in combat corps.
Yeah, they were the first ones in the combat to bring them in, and then obviously it spread through all of the combat corps. But it was at that really that turning point of going, okay, well, are we going to change? And I remember actually going to RMC and going to other units, and actually one of our talking points was, we're now taking female applicants. You know, so you're more than welcome to come in, and that was a big change, obviously, in the culture of how we ran things, and you know, how we manage our own troops.
So you had the pleasure of deploying a couple of times on operations, both into Iraq and Afghanistan. Iraq, was that using this like technology almost sometimes for the first time in the battle space?
They did. In Iraq, we did have the Skylark UAV there, but I was in charge of the target acquisition troops. So we had the weapon locating radars, and we were there to identify when the insurgents were firing rockets at the base, and how we were doing that. So I took almost an intelligence role or an artillery intelligence role in that sense. And I was producing reports based on, were they firing when the moon was up, when it wasn't, you know, what technology were they using? What were the tactics, techniques and procedures they were doing? And we were actually able to, in coordination with the US, we were able to track that there was a major from Saddam Hussein's artillery unit that was traveling around the battle space, training people to fire rockets. And we were able to identify that because of certain things that he was teaching them in terms of chalk lines to fire off the rockets. And that was all from, you know, TTPs or SOPs from Saddam Hussein's artillery. And so we were able to track his line, and then we coordinated the US patrols to actually capture that person, and it completely shut down indirect rocket fire for months from that point. And so that was my most, in terms of a military career, my unit there, that was our most successful trip ever, because we actually cracked this case. We worked with the US, and we created sort of an extended period of peace for the base.
Yeah, and it's, I think anyone who's deployed, you know, into the Middle East over the last, you know, couple of decades, is that the siren that goes off with the, you know, the incoming over the speaker, and those 2 seconds where you hit the deck and wait to hear the bang. And when you hear the bang, it's always a great moment because it's not you.
Yeah.
Now, this is actually, saving lives, particularly in our bases. Now, so what about your Afghanistan role?
So Afghanistan was with the Scan Eagle UAV. We were supporting both the Special Forces patrols as well as the main reconnaissance task force, MRTF2, and their patrols. So we worked with the Dutch, we worked with the Americans, we worked with the Australians, we worked with the Special Forces, and essentially we were Overwatch, intelligence, surveillance, and we patrolled all the valleys in Afghanistan over the top of our forces.
So after having a pretty, let's just say, interesting career with some really interesting time to actually go play with these pretty cool toys in real time, to have an influence on the battle space, and not just locally, but being a key participant in capturing the Iraqi major, having a real influence and effect on the greater battle space. When are you starting to feel that your welcome's sort of up, or when you're starting getting the itch to scratch that it's time for something new?
There was a couple of things. So I planned for my transition out early by going to or applying to go to CTMC, so the Capability Technology Management College at University of New South Wales. Because I thought if I get into that capability side, it'll give me another sort of string to my bow. So I went and did that and got my master's degrees, and then I got offered command. So I got my own battery. I was awarded battery commander, and that same month I got diagnosed with a degenerative back disorder, which took me out of command. So they essentially said to me, well, you can't be a commander if every sort of month you're on your back for a week. You need to be a desk job. So they said, look, we're happy to put you back into OPSO. We're happy to put you into a desk role and maintain that. And that's not something I was interested in doing, because to me, I saw that as just marking time in my career. So I decided to use my my exit strategy, which was the couple of master's degrees I got through CTMC, and jump out into industry.
It's funny because for those that aren't military out there, command is a real aspirational target that we all go for. It's almost infused in us that it's the elite path. And I used the term before, the pleasure of being able to deploy in operations, but it actually is a really special thing when you get to take young Australian men and women overseas into combat theatres and have a direct responsibility on their lives and their activities. It is a super special thing. And when command is taken off you, it can be really challenging for, in terms of what's next. Is this career even for me anymore?
Yeah. And it was literally within a few weeks, like, they said, congratulations, you've got command. You're going to be BC of 131 STA battery, and that had been everything I'd aspired to for over a decade. And then like 2 weeks later, I went to the specialist and he went, well, you've got a degenerative back disorder. Every few weeks, you're going to be, out of action. You can't do physical activity. You can't do all of these things. And this is probably going to be permanent for the rest of your life. It was like, as soon as I got everything I wanted, it got snatched away from me, like within a couple of weeks. So
the key thing about command is obviously leading from the front and being able to do everything with your soldiers, and being able to, even little things like if you can't participate in PT or throw the pack on your back and go for a march with your company or your battery, then it just really diffuses everything, dilutes everything that you ever thought it could be. So now we've got to this point where there's a definitive closed door on the core career path in the military. You still probably got the opportunity to, again, keep in the capability space or do a more technical role, but that, the prize cherry's been taken off the table. How long did it take you to actually put your discharge papers in and get out the door? Did you tread water a little bit, or were you done?
Yeah, no, that was in May. And I actually left the military at the end of that year. So I was in the OPSO position at that point. I was meant to start my battery command the next year. I didn't want to leave my CO on the lurch. So I finished out the year as OPSO, but I gave him a lot of warning to go, I'm not going to sit in OPSO for another 2 to 4 years. I'm going to get out. But I finished out that year and was able to plan my time, develop my connections, and I started going to, defense and business events and networking events and just trying to build my connections in industry. And then I jumped out at the end of that year, and I was lucky enough to land the lottery of all jobs. And that was because of a network that I developed. So one of my mates, Matt Jones, who now works at BAE, him and I we had parallel careers our entire lives. So we started as lieutenants at 16 AD, Air Defense Regiment. I then went to 20 STA. He stayed at 16. And then when he got out, he went down the defense primes track. And I got out and I went down the small business track. So we all did things we both did things at the same time, but just differently. And he actually gave me the contact that got me my first job. And I sent him a really nice bottle of wine for that. But I was moving back from Canberra to Brisbane. He rang me halfway and said, look, I've got this great business called Pacific Aerospace Consulting. They're looking for a business development officer. If you can get to Brisbane by tomorrow morning, there is a breakfast meeting with the managing director, and she's willing to meet with you. I was about halfway between Canberra and Brisbane at the time, and all of my suits were in boxes, being moved up by toll. I had nothing. I was in shorts and a shirt. So I drove straight through the night all the way to Brisbane. I borrowed a suit. I wrote down, I did my research on this company. I with zero sleep, I ran out to Bowen Hills to meet with them and pitched my plan on how I was going to do it and landed the job.
It's funny that I know one of the things I'm fascinated to learn about is your pathway into entrepreneurship and how BenchOn was started. But for a lot of people, getting into business straight out of the military, a little bit too risky, or it's not quite ready yet, or the idea hasn't quite fermented. Had you started planting these entrepreneurial seeds, or was it just a transition from job A to job B, or the next step?
It's a strange one. I always thought I would be my own boss at one point, and there was probably 4 or 5 different business ideas I had while I was in the military, and each one of them I implemented to a different level. And each one of those ideas, I learned new things about how not to start a business, I guess is the best way to put it, because none of them turned out to be real good ideas. Well, they were all real good ideas. They just never were going to be good businesses for me.
You've got to have your tragic stories, man. I remember when I was finishing up in the military, I thought it would be a great idea, because I used to be a cut flower grower at one time, to start a cut flower sales business in eastern suburbs of Sydney. I'm like, oh, eastern suburbs, mate, they got plenty of money. Surely they'll love flowers. So I tried to start a flower business. I'd go out to the markets at 3 o'clock in the morning, come back, bunch them up. Didn't have enough refrigeration. Then I'd go to Army and McGreen all day. Then I'd come back and try and sell flowers in the afternoon. Just because you think it's a good idea doesn't actually mean it. So it was, but you'll learn heaps of lessons along the way.
Well, that was it. Every single one of them, I learned a lesson. My very first one was, we went around. We were in DHA houses, or Defence Housing Authority houses, or everywhere, every posting we went to. But we had cats. Bloody cats. I hate cats. But we had cats at that point. And we always had our doors open because the cats needed to come in and out of the house. And we got flies and everything else. And I said, you know what? We need a cat door, but we couldn't request a cat door because it was a DHA rental. So I went, if only we had a thing that we could attach to the screen, the sliding screen that had a cat door in it, and we could just take that with us. And I was like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. So I designed it. And I was almost to the point of paying someone to do up a prototype. And then I went, actually, I'm just going to do a bit of market research. And then I found an Australian company that did the exact same thing. They've been doing it for 10 years, and they were actually in Brisbane, they were just a few suburbs over. And I was like, why didn't I just look up? Why didn't I do my market research first, when I had the idea? And I would have just found this company and would have just bought their product rather than going down these months of business development to try and create this company. So rule number 1, always check the bloody market. when you have a great idea, because there's probably someone out there who's done it.
Go check out Bunnings, mate. They're on the shelf at Bunnings. I think they're aisle 5 or something like that.
Yeah. It's like, so that was you know, lesson number 1. And then there was another couple. At each one, I learned a different lesson, and each one was just as hard as the next. But then when I jumped out, I was working at Pacific Aerospace. They were just an amazing company with amazing capability. They gave me a huge amount of initiative. I was able to run the country for them in terms of business development and strategy and where we were going. So I really did land the lottery of jobs, because I was able to work from home on the Gold Coast and just travel wherever I needed to. So jumping out of the military, that was really exciting. But one of the key issues I had coming from a military background was I dropped my routine. You know, routine is paramount in the military, and you get used to it. And then when you jump out and you're the master of your own domain and you can do whatever you like, I dropped routine, and you know what? That led to mental health issues. It led to productivity issues. Like, my whole world started to unravel because I thought, oh, I don't need to do those things anymore. And there was a point where I actually went, you know what? I need to go back to my roots. Like, I need to go back to what worked. And I implemented a military, you know, regime and routine, and I'm going to do this at this time, and I'm going to do this at this time. And that sort of got me back on track. And that was a big learning coming out of the military. That
It's
the routine.
It's interesting to talk about the routine, because you know, when people find out that I was in the army, they're like, oh, you're so self-disciplined or this and that. Well, to be honest, for me, that's a total fallacy for me. Like, confessing, I actually struggled with that. And it was only the fact that I had to turn up at PT at 7 o'clock every morning that I was fit, because I had to do it. And I'm the same as you. Once that structure was taken away from me, you know, I struggled with, you know, my weight and my health, and until I was actually able to find something now, which is boxing now, and of how I have my routine. I have to turn up, and I have to have that structure. So that structure is really important, because for me, I am a flawed human in terms of sometimes my self-dedication and desire outside of that structure. I need that framework to guide me along. Otherwise, it is a challenge for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I had to implement that. And then I had to give myself reasons to want to do that stuff. So now I do trail running, long distance trail running. And by training for events, I need to do a certain amount of kilometers and a certain amount of runs every day. And that gets me up, because I've got to do that stuff before work. And, you know, you have to almost put these self-imposed limitations on yourself to go, you need to get up and get this stuff done. Because otherwise, you're right. We're just naturally like, oh, whatever, like, I'll pay that off. But as soon as you do that, you see your life unravel so fast that you're like, no, I need to impose my own restrictions to get back to that sort of military way of life, to go, you have to be here or else.
Yeah. I lived in a state, I've said this before, almost in perpetual fear when I was in the military, because I was always had to be on time. You know, we don't get any sick days. Like, if you're sick, they'll send an ambulance out to come and get you to take you to hospital. If you're that sick, you go to work, and then you go see the doctor at work. And if the doctor says, you know, okay, you can go home, but there was no calling up saying, hey, I'm not coming in today. That just didn't happen at all once in my 12 years.
And that was it. That whole thing. My dad actually said to me, he goes, if you want to learn to run and you're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, just get dressed. All you have to do is get to the letterbox. If you get to the letterbox dressed for a run and you want to then go back to bed, you can go back to bed. But if you get to the letterbox, he goes, I guarantee you'll go for a run, because you're up, you're dressed, you're outside, you'll just run. And it was the same. The military is really smart in doing this, right? You can't just go, oh, I'm calling in sick. You had to get up, get dressed, go into work, go see the doc, and then get approval to go home. And by the time you got to work, you're like, I'm not really sick. You know, I'll just do it, you know, like.
Plus morning tea around the corner. So
yeah.
I just want to go back a little bit here about being the ideas guy, because for me, there's a big thing between, you know, being an entrepreneur and a wantrepreneur. And if you're the ideas guy in a business, like, well before I ever joined the army, like I used to work on a lot of farms, and I'd always come up to the farmer like, oh, I've got a different way to do this or a different idea to do that. And ultimately they'd be like, it's my farm, mate, not doing it like that, doing it my way.
Right.
Actually the military was a bit different because it didn't really allow that kind of creativity, particularly in the roles that I had. But if you're that ideas guy, you're probably automatically setting yourself up to be an entrepreneur, business starter, business developer sooner or later. You're just testing, you're just waiting for that right thing. So you're in Pacific Aerospace, loving your job. Why do you leave a great job?
I put this down to almost ignorance. It's a good thing, coming out of the military.
Decision point, like.
Yeah. I came out of the military. I had no understanding of how industry worked. I had no understanding how to sell things. I didn't understand commercial, realities or anything like that. And so I was learning all this from scratch. And I've always said it came down to that red flag system. And you might remember this from the military, when someone goes, oh, that's just the way it always was, or that's just the way we've always done it. As an officer, you'd be like, well, now I have to check that. Like, I can't just take your word that because we've always done it that way, that's the best way. Like, I need to investigate this and determine if it's the most efficient, most productive, the best way to do things. And that's the way I went into industry. So I went in there with a blank slate. I took everything that people were saying at sort of face value, and then I would question certain things and go, but why is that the case? And people would often say, well, it's just the way business is. You've just got to deal with it. And I'd go, but why is that way? Like, I wanted to understand why it was just business as usual. And the more I asked those questions and the more I investigated, the more I found gaps, and the more I found, that it wasn't as logical as you would think, the reasons people did things or the reasons that businesses made these decisions. And the best one was, we lost a contract. Like, we put a lot of work in, we won this contract. It was up for renewal. There was a budgetary issue from the Commonwealth. They said, look, we've got a 6-week gap before we can make a decision on this. So just stand down, we'll come back to you. And, we couldn't afford as a business to keep these people on the payroll. So we were like, well, we've got to let you go. And they went and got new jobs. And then the Commonwealth came back to us 6 weeks later and said, well, we're ready to go now. Like, have you got your staff? And we said, we don't. We had to let them go because we couldn't keep them sitting on the bench. And when I talked to my boss, he sort of said, well, that's just the way business is. It's peaks and troughs. And, we hope to survive long enough through the troughs to get back to the peaks. And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And you just have to get used to it. And
hang on, mate. I've got to stop you there. Have you planted the seed for the segue now? The sitting on the bench.
That was it. That was the bench, right? Like, that was it. We had these people sitting on the bench in the troughs, right? That's exactly what it was.
Thinking the ideas guy now is just like, man, we've got a problem here. Why are these dudes sitting on the bench?
Exactly. And so then I went, what do you mean we just try to survive through the troughs to get back to the peaks? Like, can we not create some sort of a system to find more work in the troughs and get these intelligent, highly skilled people off the bench working on things until the next big project comes up? But it hadn't connected at that point. And it wasn't until about 2 weeks later, I was sitting inside one of the Prime's offices, and I was trying to sell our wares there and trying to find new contracts. And one of their staff, slammed a phone down and he went, the bloody government, we told them 6 weeks ago they were going to need 2 engineers. They ignored us, and now they ring today going, we need 2 engineers by tomorrow because we've got a huge problem. And he goes, I don't just have engineers sitting on the bench just waiting for people, for their phone call. And that was the clicking point. That was like, it was like this fuse that went off, that it was like, oh my God, SMEs have all of this excess staff sitting on the bench at different times because they can't find work and they're struggling to survive. And then you've got these huge companies that are like, I don't just have a bench of people ready to drop, when things go wrong. And I went, well, what if I could link up all of that excess capacity with the companies that needed it? And that was the light bulb that I went home and I literally spent the next 6 hours that night writing a business plan. And I was like, I was up all night, and my wife got up in the morning, and I was trying to explain to her in my manic state what I'd come up with, because everything in me told me that this was the idea. You know, I told you I had multiple ideas through the military. You get it. You get this feeling inside when you know that this is the one. This is the idea that's going to work.
Yeah,
and you're
but
like,
this is super exciting for me to hear this, like, because, you know, as a fellow ideas guy, it's almost like the Big Bang or something, and then the dust particles start swirling, but nothing's formed, and you just can't, like, it's just not crystallized. And then you're thinking about it, and you think about it, and slowly these little bits join together, and all of a sudden you've got something. It doesn't mean it's really well defined, but you just can lay your finger on something and you go, I don't know what it is, but I've got something here, and I want to run with this.
that's it.
My only problem is that I have one of those about, you know, once every other day, and it's only because my business partner, you know, Matt, who basically goes, Matt's primary job in our business is just to go, no, mate, no. But I love that at that moment.
So Katie calls it, so her job is managing the Mad Hatter's tea party.
Yeah.
And so she goes, you're the Mad Hatter, and you come in and go, I've got this idea. We're going to do this, and it's going to be great, and we're going to go here and there and there. And she just goes, no, stop.
No.
Yeah.
That no person is so important in any business. And, like, you know, it's, you know, there's books about it, you know, rocket fuel and traction and all that kind of stuff, describe the visionary and the integrators. But for me, I'm really blessed to have a business partner like Matt, who was one of my Dungeon classmates, to be that leveler, to be the balance, you know, the yin and the yang. So Katie's, is that her role in the business as well, or is this just her tempering you just in as a partner?
Bit of both, actually. Yeah. So at the start, when I was pitching this idea, she had no idea what I was talking about. She was just like, I can see you're very excited. I'm excited for you. I don't understand what the hell you're talking about, but, you know, if you want to bounce it off me, then go for it. And I did for like weeks. That's all I talked about. And I manically walked around and just whiteboarded everything, and I systems engineered a whole platform. And she just sort of looked at me politely nodding. And then over time, she really got an understanding of it. And then I kicked it off, right? And I started getting companies, and I got clients, and I built a platform, and I got accepted into an accelerator. And then I said to her, I said, look, I can't do this on my own as a side hustle. I'm still got a full-time job with PAC. I need you to help me set up the back end. So she, you know, and because as a military wife, she jumped around jobs. So she'd done financial controlling, accounting, operations. She'd done sales. You know, she did all of that. Like, she understood how to run a company. Yeah. All I knew was the idea I had, you know, and so I brought her in and said, I need you to help me set this up. And then over time, as the company grew, she ended up quitting her job because I needed her full time, and I ended up quitting PAC because I needed to be on it full time, and that's how she became the COO and the naysayer to my yeses.
So in this, the crystal is well and truly formed now. We're running with something. Had you ever read any books like the Lean Startup or any kind of, you know, MVP kind of philosophy? Can we just unpack, you know, what your minimum viable product was that you tested to market?
Yeah, I didn't know what minimum viable product was, and I got accepted into the Blue Chili Accelerator program, which taught me about a minimum viable product. It put me onto the Lean Startup, you know, and I then understood I guess the smarts of starting with a concept and just testing and adjusting as you went through. I mean, testing and adjusting was a big military thing, and I got that. But when I had the idea, I systems engineered an entire platform to a gold standard, and I went, this is what my business is. And then I took that to an IT company, and I said, how much is to build this? And they went, oh, it's going to be $1 million. Yeah. And I was like, I'm never going to be able to pay you that, you know? So I thought the business wasn't going to work. And then when I went to Blue Chili, they said, no, you're doing it wrong. Like, you have the great idea. So what's the minimum thing you need to prove that idea? And it was, you know, this very basic website with a very basic sort of database system where customers could enter what they wanted and other companies could enter in what they do. And then manually behind the scenes, we would match those up. So that whole, like, the duck feet under the water, moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. So BenchOn looked like a very seamless professional system, but behind the scenes, me and Katie were running around going, this company can do that and that company can do that. How do we match them, and who do we ring, and how do we find companies? And we were like going crazy behind the background to try and make these things match. But we learned thousands of lessons that evolved our product and our portal. And over 7 years, we've now developed something which in no way resembles what I designed on day one. And that's because we designed it based on what the clients wanted and what our customers wanted, not what we thought they wanted.
There's a saying, I don't know where I heard it, but it's something along the lines of, if you wait to take the perfect product to market, you're well and truly too late already. So just being able to take this, crystallize this idea, and it's a real challenge for us. You already instinctively knew this was a good idea, as well as Katie and your mum and your best mates as well. But does the market think it's a good idea? And that's the challenge, like, how do we get something out there and then let the market test and adjust us and improve, and we listen and improve what we do. Any connection with the way that you used to listen or learn, or ISR feeds, or how did you gather data to really know what the market was looking for so that you could evolve this product? Because it's well different today to what it was in that first little, hey, let's swap people off the bench. And so just to talk about that first model, can you just describe what you did to help talent get out of the peaks and troughs?
Yeah. So my original idea was an automated platform that any company that needed contingent support, and when I say contingent, contracted in support, not hiring them permanently. I needed a project manager, I needed a logistician, I needed a systems engineer, I needed an aerospace engineer, whatever it was, for a set period of time. I would put it into a system, and then the algorithm would go, well, here are the businesses that have that person on the bench with the skill sets within the price range, and they're willing to subcontract them to you. And in that way, we would make sure that there's no underutilized talent. That idea is still how it works now, but the way in which that works is very, very different, and the processes that you go through are very different. Like, one of the things we learned early on was conflict of interest. Companies didn't want to be putting out there for everyone to see what they needed. Oh, I've got a job, this is all of the requirements, these are the skill sets I need, and I'm willing to pay this much. They don't want people seeing that, because their competitors will see it and therefore know what they're trying to do. So we had to implement a conflict of interest gate that allowed companies to test the water and say, well, here is some bits of information. If you're interested, tell me who you are and I'll tell you whether you're allowed in. So we put these sort of need to know controls in place, and that was a big game changer that changed things, and that was put in place just by talking to the first sort of 15 to 20 companies that we were working with.
How did you also manage, so if I'm a company that has an engineer and the engineer's got some downtime, does it also work in reverse in terms of protecting your IP when that engineer was working elsewhere?
Yeah, so we also learned that what we were doing was not as revolutionary as we wanted to make out. We were simply enabling subcontracting, which happens all the time. You will get an auditor from KPMG to come into your business and audit your books and then go back to KPMG. And you're not going to think about, well, I'm stealing KPMG's employee to do a task for me and I'm going to steal their IP and then they're going to go back. You're employing KPMG to audit your books. I'm employing, this project management company to provide project management services for me for 3 months so that I can get this task done, and then they're going to go back. And it was the way that we expressed it. You're not sharing stuff. You're not, it's not altruistic. It's nothing like that. It is simply a system that will tell you when people need what you have as a business. And we had to sort of temper the way that we explained it, because we tried to explain it in this, over the top way of, if you've got excess capability, other businesses can use your staff and all these sorts of things. And people were having these weird reactions. Like I had a woman say to me, there is no way I'm going to let any other company have access to my staff because my staff are the reason that my business is successful. And if I give them access to my staff, then their business will be successful and I won't be. So I would rather see my staff let go than share them. And I went, wait, that doesn't make sense. So you would rather fire your staff so they go and get jobs at your competitors rather than keep them and be loyal to them and earn revenue for your business using the staff that you have. And she's like, yep, 100%. No one's going to get their hands on my staff. Now, I talked to her a year later and her business was a third of the size when I first spoke to her because she had to let go of so many staff. And I asked her whether her staff went and started working for her competitors. And she went, yeah, those disloyal bastards went and got jobs at all my competitors. And I was like, do you hearing what you're saying? Like you're cutting your own nose off to spite your face. But that was the culture of business. It was like, these are mine and no one can have them. So we had to evolve. It wasn't about the function of matching. It was about how do we sell it? How do we get inside people's minds to explain this is just about using your capability and your capacity better to earn more revenue for your business and create stability rather than some altruistic like, oh, well, I've got someone on the bench, so I'll lend them to you for a bit. It's not, you're not lending them. They're paying you for a business service.
Just do a job. It's a really simple way to describe it. And it just comes back to those basic business principles about income and expenditure.
Exactly.
Shifting the balance. It just seems to be like a simple, prudent business decision.
Right. And so that was a big learning for me because I felt like I was banging my head against the wall because I had this great idea and there were a whole bunch of businesses were like, this is fantastic. And then I go, okay, well, are you going to use the platform? And they go, oh, it's just not for us because we don't like to share our staff. And it's like, you just told me you were having trouble finding the talent you need for your projects. You were just telling me that you're having trouble with employees being on the bench and you're having to let them go. And I don't understand why this isn't for you. And it was all about, well, we don't like to share our staff. And that was...
Yeah, it's interesting because those two words that we use in business now, productization and commercialization, it's just feeding a different revenue source by productizing that talent to be a subcontracting source of revenue for you.
Right. I have an admin assistant that works 3 days a week. She would love a full-time job. I can't employ her full-time because I just don't have the revenue for it. But you know what? Through this system, I could get a contract for my business for you to support another company for 2 days a week. And therefore, my employee now has full-time work. I get the 3 days person and my business is actually earning revenue to counteract the money I have to pay you on the 3 days. So now I'm actually making more money as a business. You know,
sorry, mate, I interrupted after you. No,
that's right. That's just when you look at it that way, it's like, well, I don't understand why that was in the early days so hard to capture. But I think the platform was ahead of its time, and it took COVID to really hammer this point home to go, well, we all need better ways to manage our capability and our staff and our employees, and we were perfectly suited when that hit.
Let's unpack COVID in just one moment. But the reason I got excited and I was just about to jump in there is what's beautiful in business is like when we have a win-win relationship. But this isn't just win-win. This is win-win and win. Yeah. Because it's not only us, it's not only our, let's call them collaborator, not a competitor, but it's also our team member who's getting more experience, more skills. You know, whenever we can get this, triangle of a win-win-win in any relationship, there is good things happening for everybody. And too often we're too protective, we're too scared in terms of our own, fears about holding on to everything, that we look at our competitors as competitors rather than potential collaborators. And if we have more worthiness in our own product and our own skills, we should be able to see that the market might just be big enough for everyone, and there could be some win-win-wins here.
That's exactly right. And that is the reason that one of our values at BenchOn is win-win-win. If you can't create a win-win-win, if you can't create a win-win-win situation, you're either not thinking hard enough or it's not worth doing. And that's how we operate, because we have seen those win-win-win scenarios right from the start. And that's the way we set everything up from
That wasn't scripted. That's just great minds think alike there, mate.
Yeah. No, actually, when you said it, I was like, boom, this is perfect. I can line this up. Yeah.
So let's quickly go through the pandemic, because that, for me, I first spoke to you like literally in lockdown, and it seemed to be a really cool model at that time because it made sense. Companies were like really in a total state of flux about, their jobs, everything was changing. You seem to have just a fit for purpose, right time, right place solution.
Yeah. You're right. Everything went to hell very, very quickly. And there were entire industries shutting down. Everyone was in a panic. There were other industries that were flying through the roof, like IT, help desks, the supermarkets. All of these industries were like, we don't have enough people, and other industries like the airline industry would just like shut down completely. And we heard of scenarios where, the captain of an A380 aircraft was now stacking shelves at Woolworths just to keep money coming in, and all of those horrible things. And there were a whole bunch of companies jumping in to try and help. And you're right, we were perfectly placed. So one of the examples of how we helped transition across industries was Rugby Australia. Rugby shut down. Obviously, there was no games, and they couldn't keep their staff on the books because they had nothing to do. So they turned to BenchOn, and we would do things like their senior marketing manager, who was so well educated and so highly experienced. We matched him to a small disability startup who had a very specific new product that they developed for COVID, to help businesses, and they needed to get that marketing underway. So we matched them to the senior marketing person at Rugby Australia, who came in, developed a marketing plan, helped them with their advertising, and launched a campaign in 2 weeks at a fraction of the cost that person would cost, because all Rugby Australia wanted to do was cover the salary of that person and keep them employed. So now this small startup was able to hire this extremely experienced person to get this new product off the ground. And it was so successful. Rugby Australia kept their marketing person on the books. The startup got their new product launched. Everyone was a win-win. Like, it was a win-win situation in the middle of the pandemic when everything was doom and gloom. And that, to me, was the reason why we did it.
So where have you taken BenchOn to its next level? Because it's not just about talent now. There is procurement and tendering. You have been able to expand this, or like build onto the crystals like some crazy conglomerate. That's going back to my year 4 geography.
Yeah.
Probably not the right word, but we're actually building this thing on now and still listening to the market. Where have you taken to BenchOn today? Where have you taken BenchOn to today?
Yeah, so our vision now is to create a digital industry ecosystem that fully maps out where all the capability and capacity is across all businesses, across all industries, and then be able to reallocate talent, products, and services whenever and wherever it's needed. And by doing so, what we do is we create resilient industries that, we have businesses that are diversified in their revenue streams. They can create more jobs. They can tap into more companies. We've got supply chains that are resilient so that when our international supply chains get cut, you've got an automated system that can redirect those supply chains to local sources to keep those businesses going. And a good example would be during COVID when we needed to make more PPE. It was a shambles the way they tried to do it. They put up forms on government websites going, if you're a factory and you could do these things, please tell us. It took months and months just for the government workers to review those forms and then to contact the companies. Like, in a digital industry ecosystem, they could simply put in, this is what we need, this is what we need to be developed. The system would allocate them to the businesses that could do that, and those businesses could go, yes. And we could have PPE developed within weeks, not 6 months, within weeks, because we've got smart, intelligent matching of capability to where it's required.
Just on that note, have we also created the ability to get more small and medium businesses involved here, straight to government, straight to big corporate, because they've got the access to match that capability and not have to go through a multiple bureaucracy of tender and all this kind of process.
Yeah. So if you look at all the systems today, put yourself in the mind of a small business. If I'm going to win work, I have to be registered on at least 15 different tender sites. You know, every state has their own tender site. You've got Oz Tender, you've got Vendor Panel, you've got ICN Gateway, you've got all of these different portals that I can find tenders on, and you have to be registered for the right things at the right time. You need to know that the projects have come out. So you need to hear that in the news. You then have to go search for that project, find where the project page is, register yourself against it to then find out what's going on. Like, it is a huge amount of work for a small business to find where they could help out. Whereas in this system, if I'm a business and I create one profile and I say, these are all the things I can do, and then there's a smart algorithm behind it that goes, well, actually, this project's looking for you and this company's looking for you, and your capabilities required here in another state, in another industry that you never would have thought of, that you've never had relationships with before. All of a sudden, my market is exploded. You know, I've got this huge opportunity, and all these things are brought directly to me so that I can expand my business fast with some sort of confidence that when I hire people or I expand my factory or whatever, I know that the opportunities are there. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's the fundamental change. So we introduce tendering, we introduce business intelligence. You know, like the state government, Transport and Main Roads, they, through their portal, which is Supply TMR, they have the ability to delve into the entire Queensland supply chain to say, what's the depth of manufacturing capability in trains, or what's the total number of companies that can provide project managers in Northern Queensland, or how many contracts have gone to remote businesses or Indigenous businesses through these projects. So when you talk about including more businesses, a system that doesn't care about, you know, where you're registered or whatever, I will allocate work to a remote company in outback Queensland that has what they need for this project in Brisbane, if the project in Brisbane can facilitate an out of location response. So now that company that might have only known their small local network is now linked into a major project in a major city simply because they're the best person for the job.
This can be game changing now. That, you know, accessing these kind of contracts can move things to having, you know, intergenerational consequences on the business if you can win one of these. But as you mentioned, the administrative burden without a platform like BenchOn is just prescriptive from even doing it. So
right.
In terms of your businesses, if I'm here listening as a business owner, what kind of businesses should be getting on and checking out BenchOn? Give us a rundown, big, small, left, right, up, down.
Sure. So federal, state, local governments and large government, you know, global enterprises or enterprises that are managing big supply chains should be talking to us about creating a workforce and industry portal so that they can manage their own supply chains, they can allocate their own tenders, their own workforce opportunities, and then have business intelligence into the depth of capability within their own sphere of influence. And any SME that provides a service should be on board. It's completely free to sign up. You create one profile. There's a portal marketplace that allows you to pick and choose which portals you want to be a part of. So do I want to be a part of Transport and Main Roads in Queensland? Do I want to be a part of Hanwha Defence Australia and help them build the new generation of infantry fighting vehicles for the Defence Force? Do I want to be a part of Disaster Relief Australia and volunteer the time of my underutilized staff to help our remote, communities get back on their feet quicker? Because I'm a network engineer and I could go in and help a remote community get their IT network back up and running. Or, there's so many different options there and because it's free and because it is so simple to sign up, I think everyone should be a part of it. And the more companies that we have, the more opportunity there are for everyone involved.
Look, what I really like about this is that you've been able to solve a one-to-many problem by focusing on a platform-based solution. Like you could have kept the business, at, hey, pick up a call, hey, I need some of this, very manually be able to, link the talent on the bench with the company that needs them. But you've been able to take this to, a platform way of thinking. And for me, systemize, automate, delegate is like my three mantras. How do we build great process? And with that great process, how do we express it through the right platforms? And then once we've expressed it through the right platform, how are we empowering our people? Because there's one thing about military mindset for business: platforms are combat multipliers and they're game changers. Yep. So the reason the military invests in F-35, and as we look towards AUKUS submarines and things like this, a platform can provide such a leveraged effect in terms of how you can not only, well, in the military, influence the battle space, but in business, how you can influence your effect into the business environment. So just the platform way of thinking is just such a great way to shift from one to many.
Yeah, thanks.
Mate, I could talk about this stuff all day because I really love it, but I might just draw to a bit of a conclusion, and I just want to ask you a couple of things to wrap up. Number one, what's next for BenchOn? Where do you see this thing going?
So winning the Transport and Main Roads contract and providing that portal. So there's something like $27 billion worth of infrastructure projects to go through that in the next, few years. That has scaled us up, and it's also put us on the map against all of the big competitors, including the government-funded competitors that are out there. So we're now in a different sphere. This year is our scale year, so we will be growing as a business, and my current predictions show that we're going to have to grow as a company by about 5 times this year in terms of employee staff. So that's going to be busy, but where we're going is that real digital industry ecosystem and building out, government ecosystems is where the future is. Creating state government ecosystems where all of their departments have their own portals, they manage their own supply chains, but as a small business, I'm registered in once and I get access to all of it. And we'll be expanding that across more states as we go forward. So at the moment, we're focused in Queensland. Our portals are focused Australia-wide and New Zealand, but from the government side, we'll be expanding into the other states very, very soon.
For those listening in the car, I love the body language of you rubbing your eyes and your forehead as you're talking about 5 times growth and stuff. Lucky you've got the talent and access through BenchOn. You'll be able to find your way. A couple of quick questions to wrap it up. What was your best experience in the military?
My best experience, there was a couple, but firstly, the Iraq experience, the team I had with me, the young guys that were there, and all doing such a fantastic job and having such an amazing outcome at the end of it was really the highlight of my time. And then the friendships that I made with the soldiers that I deployed with, particularly in my lieutenant and captain years, were definitely key highlight for me.
Perfect. Any key lessons that you can share as a last point? What would you do? If you had your time again, what would you do? Or what's one key takeaway that you'd like to share with another business owner?
Nothing happens as fast as you think. Katie and I always talk about this. If we knew that it was going to be 7 years of hard slog to get to the point where it all of a sudden worked, would we have done it again? You need persistence and there's unwavering, almost arrogance to go, no, I'm backing this and I'm not going to give up. Like tenacity, I guess, is our biggest virtue and our biggest lesson, and we employ that every day, and it's the reason we're still here. So if you don't have that tenacity and that drive to never ever give up, even when things are the darkest that they've ever been, then rethink what you're doing.
Well, I can still see you holding on to that excitement of that first night when you got in and wrote the business plan, and that excitement is still there in terms of the belief in the product. And from a product to market fit perspective, what a great lesson in terms of getting to the market at the right time with the right thing. Mate, let's wrap it up there. I really have enjoyed watching your story, particularly as a veteran business owner. we need to tell more of these stories, more of these great success stories about how, men and women of all rank services, how they can come out and really have an impactful impact, on the world, after the military career. So, mate, thanks for joining us today on the Military Mindset for Business podcast. I will be seeing you next week at the Avalon Air Show, and watching you engage with all these primes, and I'm really looking forward to supporting other veteran-owned businesses get into getting these contracts and working through the BenchOn platform in the future. Really, mate, great chat. I really appreciate it, and thanks for your time.
No, thanks, mate. Good to chat. See you next week.
Thanks, everybody. So that wraps up this episode of the Military Mindset for Business podcast. Do that click, like, share thing. Help us out. Throw us a bone there. Pete Liston, out.